Welcome back, everyone. Hello, hello, hello. My name is Bryant Francis. I am once again the invisible voice inside your head, coming to you live on the Gamasutra Twitch channel. Down in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen, you will observe that there are three elegantly crafted faces peering out at you from the void. Alex, first of the faces, would you please introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Alex Waro, first of the faces, last of the faces. I guess not. My name, I am an editor of Gamasutra. Sorry, that fantastic intro just kind of threw me off. And we are joined by two fantastic people. Would you guys mind introducing yourselves?
Sure. My name is Chris. I'm the co-founder, creative director, and an artist for Darkest Dungeon.
I'm Tyler. I'm the other co-founder and game design director for Red Hook Studios. And is my face low poly or is it high poly? I was just kind of wondering.
It's just kind of, it's multi.
It's cell shaded. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's got a good aesthetic.
We are playing Darkest Dungeon because, first off, before I introduce Darkest Dungeon, happy birthday, Alex.
Thank you.
May your
Yes.
days be long and full of many things. It's the longest day of the year. Fun fact. And
Yeah,
so
it's
we'll be
also former Gamasutra editor Christian Nutt's birthday. So wherever he is in the world, wandering the world, happy birthday to Christian Nutt.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was Tyler's birthday yesterday.
Happy birthday, Tyler.
So apparently it's everyone's birthday. Except
Yeah.
We're all those late Geminis just trying to slip in before the solstice and all the weird summer stuff happens.
Nice.
That's right.
I'm also a Gemini. Early June, though. June 8th. That was a couple weeks ago.
Okay.
Happy birthday, Bryant.
Holy cow!
Let's play a joyful, upbeat, happy game to celebrate.
We're gonna celebrate by playing this very happy game. I'm gonna give a shout out to Azpet and Ken Streams who showed up in the chat. Thank you for watching. Just a heads up to everyone, if you have questions for Chris or Tyler, feel free to ask them. We will grab them for you. And we're playing Darkest Dungeon because there is a new DLC available for Darkest Dungeon, the Crimson Court, which I am going to venture into here in a moment. I'm just pulling my party together.
Excellent.
Chris and Tyler, could you please introduce the Crimson Court for our audience?
Well, it's a pretty substantial addition to the game. It has some mechanics that weave throughout the entire campaign, and it's meant to sort of be almost like an alternative path forward, something that you experience as you move through the main game's campaign. So it's meted out, gradually as you sort of play the main game story arc. But it adds like a lot of really interesting new mechanics, and then obviously a new character class and some things like that. So essentially, it explores the origin story of your horrible ancestor and how his debaucherous lifestyle really kicked off in fine fashion and resulted in the nuclear apocalypse of the estate when you arrive, and gives us a chance to get a little bit more lore into the game without labeling it, like a prequel or a sequel, because I don't want to spoil how the game's main arc works, but it was a little bit of a challenge. It's a very tightly knit kind of narrative loop, so we wanted to, add to it without affecting the beginning or the end in a way.
Nice. I was surprised to hear that, and I guess I don't want to dig too far because I actually have not finished that loop because this game scares me a lot. But I played a bit of it, and I think it must be especially tricky to work in, what you might traditionally call an expansion or something into the meat of a game rather than sort of tacking it on to the end. Because so often those kind of expansions are designed to challenge high-level players and give them something new to do at the top end of the power spectrum. Can you speak a little bit about, if it's applicable, how you dealt with the challenge of weaving in this new content, the new class and everything to match and mesh well with the existing game?
Yeah, I think, one key thing is, you're right, it is kind of a philosophical decision that you have to make up front as to what role that it plays. And we definitely value our high-end players a lot, but there, fortunately, a fair amount of people have bought the game, and there's a lot of people that are still in the middle of their first campaign. We've got people that have finished the game 10 times, and we've got people that are on week 150 of their first campaign, and so we really wanted to create something that might be worth buying for all of those players. So yeah, it was a challenge. So on one hand, there's just new content. Which I guess because it's sort of a role-playing, obviously, game, so you can some degree, adding new content like a new class is great because it enhances what's already there. Now you can go back and do content that you've encountered previously with this new class, and it sets like a new, just sort of broadens the experience. So we found a way to do that while also adding kind of story and some mechanics that you can opt in and out. And then we also separated out the core features of the DLC so that you could, in theory, enable or disable them a la carte. So, if you didn't want to play with this whole new Courtyard storyline after you've done it a few times, you could still play like an original version of the game, but still enable maybe the new class. Although certainly our intent is for you to enable all three of the new core things.
Sure. Yeah, it strikes me. You've been very kind to post some blogs on Gamasutra, sorry, that have been sort of really fascinating. We've done some interviews as well. You've spoken in the past a lot about how useful you found platforms like Kickstarter and Early Access for doing some prototyping and early testing and kind of like refining the game. I wonder, were you able to apply that kind of stuff to an expansion given that the game is already out? And if not, like, how did that change the way you shape this work?
Well, every time we release something, I think we get a little bit better at it. We're a small team, and the game is extremely mechanical, meaning there's a lot of like permutations and different outcomes that can happen. So we had a group of like a closed beta for this, for the DLC, which we hadn't done to the same degree for previous releases. But really, there's no substitute for watching Twitch and a live game and combing through Reddit like once it's out. And so we usually budget about a week after a launch to do sort of hot fixes and updates and tuning, and there's just no substitute for that kind of volume of play, because we can't afford to bring 300 people in like EA and do like rounds of focus testing. It's just not the way it works for a studio of our size.
Even administering. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
Even administering like a closed beta for a long time is hard, and so we keep we have added to our staff a bit, and that's really helped. So I think, like Chris said, even being able to do the closed beta that we did is something we only started doing last year. And yeah, there was sort of a challenge in that, the early access has a lot of benefits and a lot of drawbacks. But I mean, we're very pro Kickstarter, very pro early access in general, and I think it fit the game very well. So there was definitely, I think, on one hand, it would have been great to be able to early access the DLC, and I've seen a couple developers have actually done that now. And there's definitely a call for it just because it gives you a chance to work out the kinks, and then some people that want to be early adopters for all the same reasons that people might get involved with early access normally. But we chose not to early access the DLC, and so that put more of the burden on internal testing, versus kind of. It's nice to roll updates out on early access just because you have a chance to walk things back if they don't land the way you wanted them to. Mm-hmm. And as a developer, that's valuable, as one of the benefits. So, but this, we tried to get really comfortable with stuff internally first.
Yeah, right on. Let's take this early opportunity to grab a question from the chat. It's a pretty broad question, but maybe you can add something new to it. Quen Streams asks, I know this is an awfully common question for you, but how did the concept of this game come to you? What are its sort of inspirations and influences?
It kind of was just born out of this observation that a lot of time power and heroism in a video game is measured through like equipment and like the size of shoulder pads or how many how special or sparkly a sword is. And Tyler and I had been friends for a number of years, and we would always get together and play cards and hang out and drink some scotch and talk about video games. And we just kind of it just hit on that. Like, it's kind of silly because, no matter how big my shoulder pads were, if like a skeleton was coming at me, I don't know that I would be able to handle it, And so we just started exploring this idea of a game that was about, I always say this, but like the sword arm and not the sword. And from there, we just kind of, really dug into the idea of imperfection and how heroes are human. Police officers, firemen, soldiers, the people, real life heroes are all just regular people with their own vices and quirks and proclivities and good and bad traits, as are we. We even like looked at development through this lens. You can push people on a deadline and they'll get afflicted and break down and stop coming into work and get nasty to everybody, or they'll, really knuckle down, pull an all-nighter, get it all done, and, save the day kind of thing. So we just love that ebb and flow, and the idea of exploring heroism through contrast, because I think a lot of video games that I really enjoy myself personally are sort of power fantasies, right? And I think that there's absolutely a role for that, like aspirational power fantasy type game. But we just thought like there was an open space in exploring like heroism as a rarity. So when your guys in our game get heroic or virtuous, instead of buckling under the stress pressure, it's a really big swing in terms of like what you're able to do that mission. The emotional roller coaster that the player is on is a little bit more intense, and so we thought that. This is my wife, Audrey.
Hi.
Hi, Audrey.
Hi, Audrey. Aw, man, I kind of wish
We
I
all
would
work from home.
Wow.
And
Lunch delivered.
She's been afflicted herself a few times throughout development because it takes a toll not just on the party but on the people back in town.
Sure. Yeah, let's I'm gonna give you a chance to eat there for a second. I feel like maybe we could talk a little bit also about sort of the artistic inspirations behind the new stuff, the new Crimson stuff.
Good.
Whoa.
Yeah, the vampires. It's kind of. I wanted to touch. I love horror. I love horror games. I love horror movies. So I wanted to make sure that our game had like a nod to every kind of genre. So we've got the Abomination, is kind of like a werewolf. We've got the creepy Gothic ruins. We've got the haunted forest. We've got all these sort of like Lovecraft sea caves, all that stuff.
Great is the weapon.
And so one of the monsters that we didn't have in the game was vampires. So when we were talking about DLC. We thought, okay, vampires would be great. What if your guys could get vampirism? What if there was somebody that hunted your vampiric characters? All these great ideas kind of bubbled up. But I just didn't want to do like sexy vampires because our game isn't sexy. There's nothing sexy about our game. So it wouldn't
Except for
fit.
maybe one character in the Crimson Court, but continue.
Right. Or the siren for like a half a second when she does that move. But that's like it's a horrific thing. It's like, geez, anyway. So I was kind of tired of like the Twilight or Anne Rice style of vampire. Like I think it definitely had its day in the sun or the moon, however you want to put it. Because the sun will burn them.
You could also say they had their day in the sun.
It's just
both
the
of them
facts.
had some.
Yeah.
Actually, Twilight, they can go out in the sun. They sparkle.
To play baseball, they go out in the sun. They sparkle like diamonds.
Yes.
Beautiful.
It's a beautiful image. So we didn't do any of that. I thought that the idea of like parasites and ticks and blood-sucking insects was a little bit more interesting, and kind of a unique take. And we try to do that creatively in our game. Is always try to find an off-center or like offbeat road to the fiction or the implementation. Try to give it its own little twist. And so this idea of like insect-driven kind of corruption and parasitic nature of vampirism, I think, was kind of born out of that desire.
Brian, I feel like I'm walking all over this. How are you feeling now?
I'm very happy that this party, because I don't have my abusive characters in it, isn't yelling at each other all the time. That's where I'm at.
Someone is afflicted. What's your jester? It looks like your jester has the curse, which is a new feature in Crimson Court, so that he's been infected. And then he is afflicted. What's his current affliction? You got two characters that are afflicted.
He's selfish
and
and this poor sucker's fearful.
Okay.
We took him in with pretty high stress too, which maybe not optimal play.
It's
Like I said, no one's yelling at each other, so we're calling the victory.
This game is a middle management simulator. This is the boss going, I know you're tired, but knuckle down.
Yeah, these reports aren't going to write themselves.
Man, that's such a bummer because like this game, in my experience, is less about like, who is optimally suited for this task, and more about who is the least broken. Let's take the least broken people out there and let the broken ones rest.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, more
sorry,
Frank,
Frank,
go
go ahead.
I've got some blood on me though, so I can handle
As
that.
the enemy crumbles.
Okay.
Yeah, so these monsters will give your characters this crimson curse, And as long as you can see the blood vial in his inventory, periodically, like the curse just sort of sits on them and gives them like a really, light touch set of debuffs. But every now and then they'll start like craving the blood. And if you can feed them blood during that phase, they'll overcharge and get massive stat boosts. So it's really, really powerful. But if you can't get them any blood, they'll start wasting and then they'll die. So it's a bit of like an addiction mechanic in a way. And as after this mission here, that sort of introduces the courtyard enemies, these enemies spread to the rest of the game, and there's sort of like a global infestation that rises. So gradually we push you towards, more and more your guys get cursed, but you're looting more and more blood, and then you go in and do a boss rush back in the courtyard.
Something that stands out to me in this conversation that I realize we don't see a lot of in game development is like a broader exploration of the full spectrum of emotions you can evoke in a player, which like is a really like facile observation. But like, I wonder, you talk about wanting to make this game to sort of, like examine the idea of heroes as real people, right? Who have real suffering and real problems and real hangups, and also real moments of glory, right? And I wonder what other sort of areas of for lack of a better term, like theme or emotion you think could be explored in games that hasn't been done yet.
Hasn't been done yet?
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of different, I guess, approaches in different genres, but I mean, speaking to this one again, I think in a way it was our love of classic RPGs, like Chris was talking earlier about how, we've done the power fantasy to death, and there's a real, there's a need for it, and there are many products that address it. And so, another one aside from, I guess, the breaking down the infallibility of heroes, which is obviously probably number one, is this idea that you as the beneficent or overlord, at what cost to achieve these goals? Because I mean I think that's again probably taken more from real world conflict, like the themes of war and conflict between nations and things like that. But we kind of set you in here, and you're just conditioned to believe that whatever you're doing is good, right? Because every game puts you in this role where you're, unless it's something like Dungeon Keeper where they're hitting you on the head with it and saying, you're the bad guy, isn't that fun, you're the bad guy. But I think, like, aside from the fact that these heroes themselves are maybe multidimensional, at some point in the game you start thinking about, wow, what am I doing to them? Me, like, I keep sending them out, or I'm making, I'm choosing these sacrifices, like, well, for the greater good, I'm going to take these broken down heroes out there, and they're going to do their best, and, if I lose a couple, I lose a couple. And, at some point we want you to think, like, what's my role in all this?
Then we want you to keep doing it, though. Yeah. We don't want it to result in any sort of catharsis or, different perspective.
And it's players comment, there's like two, if we loosely grouped players into two groups, there's the group that gets very sad and upset about losing heroes, and then there's the group that takes a step back and says, these are merely pawns, don't get attached, don't name them in nice ways. It's sort of like, if you might have a cat that you love, and then you meet someone that grew up on a farm with, feral cats coming and going, and they're like, don't get too attached to the farm cats, their lives are short and troubled. And so I think players are the same way with the heroes. And we don't tell you what to do there. We merely just try to make it interesting, interesting set of circumstances that make you think, without, sending a message per se.
Right. I'm curious to talk about the Flagellant, which is the new class for this. I've liked him a lot since he's joined, because I like his mechanic of you're trying to get his damage down. And he's actually like has a heart attack recovery debuff right now, because when he actually had the heart attack, he became more powerful because he then just healed right away and healed someone else up, and it actually was a clutch. It was a clutch situation for that mission. So I'm curious what your thoughts were about, like, what was his design inspiration, and what did you think like the game needed, and how did you think it would like impact the rest of the game?
Chris, you want to cover the creative, and then I could cover the mechanics?
we actually had the Flagellant written down as a potential class from day one, but he's not an immediately like aspirational cool character. He's kind of gross, right? Like it's a little excessive, it's a little on the nose, as it were. And so while we kind of had this loose idea, we thought thematically it fit with the game. We kind of held off on it throughout development, because we had these sort of more poster friendly heroes that we wanted to get to. But yeah, we don't have a lot of magic in the game. There's no elemental stuff. There's no like D&D kind of like lightning bolts and that kind of thing. But obviously there's a lot of occult things, and there's a loose church faction that we don't really define. And so we thought like introducing the Flagellant, the blood themes nicely with the vampire stuff, and he kind of projects out all of his like zealousness with his right hand that's always dripping blood, which is kind of like symbolic of his suffering, and he's always yakking on about carrying the burden for the rest of the team, which everybody teases me on our Slack channel of being the team martyr. So I was channeling that a bit. But he's also pretty showy, and so I looked a little bit at like Macho Man Randy Savage and like Ultimate Warrior, because there's not enough to whip yourself, right? These guys, like in the Spanish Inquisition, they would make a big point of like walking through the middle of the towns and whipping. You have to be seen to suffer, which is kind of, I always thought, funny. Like they're suffering to get closer to God, but it doesn't count unless someone watches. In a way, it's got to be like viewed. And so there's a spectacle associated with it. So, we wanted him to obviously show skin and really relish and saturate himself with like, the self-punishment and mutilation and that kind of thing. So that's the creative 2 cents.
Right on.
Yeah, and mechanically, I mean, you hit it on the head with he gets stronger as he gets more wounded, and I think in general, most of the game mechanical decisions that we make on the game are really heavily inspired by theme. So we didn't sit there and say, what role. Well, we didn't really go what role are we missing, because we already had 15 or 16 heroes. There's a lot of variation, but we were intrigued by just what he was, and so when you think about it, you think, well, this guy suffers. He suffers for the cause, for his own cause, and so it kind of made sense that the weaker he gets, the stronger he should get. And so we already had Death's Door, as a mechanic in place. So we started thinking like, and also Afflictions. We said, well, what if we make some real special rules for him that, everyone else gets severely debuffed when they hit Death's Door, and, they just become far less functional. Well, that's where he would just be living in it, just thrilled that like, this is the moment of pure suffering. And so that kind of ended up, we're really pleased to see the response is good, because we're also asking you to like get your hero close to death, which is in Darkest Dungeon, because of permadeath, that's always a serious deal. But and I think the real like cherry on top is that yes, when he gets a Death's Door blow, or when he's even killed, he has like a bit of a final benefit to the party. And ideally, what I'd love to see is, in a boss fight, that you sacrifice your Flagellant at the key moment, trying to...
Because he stuns the enemies and heals the party as he dies. So it's kind of like a little grenade.
Nice.
Yeah, and if there's a moment where it makes sense to do that, maybe he's at Death's Door and you have a heal turn with your, Vestal or Occultist, and you choose to use it on a different hero knowingly, because you're hoping the Flagellant will get hit and killed. I think that's an interesting game moment, and if you can win a boss battle that way, it would be very memorable to say, and he gave his all, he suffered for the cause. And so that's been pretty interesting. I mean, I think by and large he's been received really well right now. There's a few reports of maybe him being a little OP, but there's always initial really strong reactions, and so we try to give it at least a little bit of time to see how it sorts out. Also from a development perspective, I think one thing we've tried to do that we learned kind of early on is, when you first release something, it's better that it's too interesting and fun and like a shiny, overpowered toy than it's not interesting. So, we'd rather err a little bit on being slightly OP and then, eventually nerf it if necessary. Although we certainly didn't go into it going, oh yes, he's OP, let's put him out. It's just more like, when you're making those hard calls, especially people, this is the first expansion we've charged for. We've done a number of free updates to the game, including a really large one back in January called the Radiant Update, which was free. And so when people, when we ask you to pay for something, we definitely want you to feel that it's exciting.
Yeah, our mantra on this DLC was like, let's put $15 worth of value into $10. Because it's a first time back to the well, and we wanted to sort of really demonstrate like our continued commitment. Like obviously Tyler said, we've updated the game in substantial ways, for free over the past year, but since we're going back to people and asking them to pay for a new product, we wanted to make sure there was just like a ton of stuff in there. And as people go through this main campaign and they keep detouring back out to the courtyard, I think it's going to become more and more obvious just how much is packed in there.
Yeah, I was about to say, it must be tricky to release new stuff and sort of err on the side of a little too powerful, too interesting, and then maybe drop it back down, since so many developers often nowadays take the tack of, rather than nerfing something that's maybe too powerful, they raise everything else up, right? So that it just seems like a win all around. And with a game like this, that'd be tricky. But then I realized, like, it's very thematically resonant to nerf a character in this. Like, all of a sudden, like, you thought somebody was good, and then no, you were wrong.
It is hard also to like raise up 15 other heroes, but we do compensate by maybe the flagellant, we'd rather err on overpowered than underpowered, but we compensate by making the bosses overpowered as well in the new monsters. No, I think like with Darkest Dungeon, when we read a post like with all the curse words like redacted out and turned into like apostrophes and hearts or whatever Steam does, we sometimes see that like, okay, we're on the right track. Like, when someone has a rage quit moment because they lost their party to the new boss or something.
Speaking of rage
quits, we do care.
Oh, yeah. Are you about to? Are we going to witness a rage quit?
Let's
Why are you sticking your hands into everything though? I don't understand. Like, you're just marching through this swamp, log jamming everything with your arm.
Touch everything.
Where's the thing I'm supposed to interact with? What?
Leave no stone unturned.
He disappeared.
Leave no gross thing untouched.
Yeah.
There was another question. It was a few minutes back. There's a question in the chat that I want to circle back to real quick. Again from Quinn Streams. Talking generally about art direction. They'd like to know exactly what were the inspirations behind the art. Like which artists, which movies, books, whatever you look at. I see a lot of Hellboy in the art of this game, but I could be totally wrong. What sort of inspired the artistic direction and the audio direction as well?
There is definitely Hellboy in there. I was a concept artist for a long, long time, and there's a big drive towards realism and accurate rendering. And I did a lot of Games Workshop stuff, and it's just like shoulder pads sparkling with the Emperor's glory. Mm-hmm. And when Tyler and I decided to pull the trigger on this, there was a couple of things. First, I knew it had to be heavy blacks because of the tone of the game. And I wanted hard edges because the game is meant to be hard-edged. So I thought like those themes were important to echo in the artwork. And so then I went back through all the comics I read like growing up, and Chris Bourassa, Mike Mignola, the Hellboy creator for sure, Guy Davis, Victor Kalvachev, just some of these artists that I felt like used a lot of black, used it to really good effect, and
the freaking bushes just dodged me.
Juice here.
Chris, I have to make two observations. One is Kier Myron just got afflicted. Kier's one of the programmers in the game, so you have Myron in there. Mm. And then you might be ready to take a blood with the Vestal. Is she craving? Is that
she already she took the blood earlier.
Oh, she's lost it. Okay, good. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is the first of many new bosses in the courtyard.
Okay. It's kind of messed up to put in the names of your development staff into the name generator. Like, that just seems kind of, I don't know.
It feels like making this game is like being in this game. Like there's a lot of afflicted moments and there's stress. Certainly, this has been the highest and the lowest of my career. Like, it's been the scariest. We went way out on a limb like before we launched the game, like financially, and with everybody's got
oh, a crit and a double death door.
Wow.
Nice.
The man at arms, man. Where is he?
So
God.
Oh, we can blame. So when you need to curse specifically because of the crocodile, you have to blame Dana, who's one of the designers on it.
You're gonna hate me, but
Yeah, man.
Yeah, run.
oh,
Come on,
no,
Brian, you can do
failed.
it.
Stay
It's
alive.
fine.
Oh,
It's the fucking.
live to fight another day, unless retreat fails, in which case.
You can get out. Surely you can get out.
Yeah.
One of these guys will let you out.
Sure. Let's if Brian can make it out, let's dig into a little deeper the resonance with the actual art of game development, right? Because I think that's something that everyone in this field deals with, and I want to know how you guys dealt with it, working on a game like this and dealing with all the pressures of Kickstarter, being out on your own, taking big risks, that kind of thing.
I mean, I gotta say, like, I think having a partner like Tyler and I are, straight down the middle on everything from ownership to decision making. We don't always do the same jobs, but we always consult and then execute as two different wings of government, I guess. And having a teammate that you trust, that's extremely competent at what they do, was invaluable, and I don't think that we would have gotten across the finish line if it was just like one or the other of us trying to make this game. So I'm really grateful that we managed to get along and learn how to fight properly and learn how to disagree and learn how to be married and but that was a big, I think, reason how we were able to kind of keep ourselves and each other in check for our weaknesses and accentuate each other's strengths and drive towards like a tangible finish line. I think if it was like I hear about a lot of some of these other indies that are just themselves doing it, or at least one guy at the top of the chain, and I don't know how that would have worked for us. I don't envy that situation.
Yeah, it always impresses me, like Brian Provinciano is a good friend.
Yeah.
He made Retro City Rampage.
Ryan Clark.
Ryan Clark. And they're able to do a lot alone. Although Ryan's been building his team. Our team is really good. The people that we brought on, and sort of assembled the team for Darkest Dungeon were a combination of friends / people we've worked with in the past that we trusted their skills, and. But I'll tell you what, it was very challenging at parts because even though the Kickstarter did well, it was most of us are sort of veteran developers, so we all took very, very large salary hits to work on the game, and you're hoping it works out. As we all know, kind of from indie game development, it's a very uncertain business, and a lot of people ask us. Especially, once we're over a beer or something, they say, well, you guys must have known. You must have known Darkest Dungeon was going to be a big success.
Yeah, you must have known.
It's like, no. I mean, if you could hear all the panic conversations that Chris and I had, and presumably...
Even Sunday night, they're like, well, the DLC, it'll be fine. I'm like, will it? How can you? You never know.
Yeah, so I think that's one thing I want to emphasize for everyone, presumably watching the stream or other developers. You just don't know. So you just make a series of decisions that you hope will result in the best product or the product that you set out to make. And I think especially when you're in the middle of it, it's really hard to remain objective. You're intimately familiar with every flaw in the game. The stress, financially as well as creatively, you want it to matter. I mean, we wanted it to financially succeed, but we also wanted it to be a game that people enjoyed, and those don't always go together, which is the funny thing. The games that are, I guess, regarded as meaningful games aren't necessarily always the ones that also sell well, or vice versa. But so all I can say is it was hard with a lot of check-in points. But every time, I guess, like some of the morale boosters I remember were certainly Kickstarter was a morale boost. Then we got very, very nervous before we showed the game in public for the first time at PAX East. Fortunately, PAX East went great. Then we got nervous again before early access. There are all these things. So I think what's kept us going, and when I look back and try to assemble the reasons of why the game has been successful, I think it just comes down to having a really, really good team. Because it's, you're making constant decisions and uncertainty about creatively, mechanically, business-wise, And so you're not going to get all those decisions right. So, but if you assemble a really good team of competent people, then you certainly set yourself up for the greatest chance of it working. But yeah, a lot of panics. I remember at one point, I think it was like December or maybe January before early access launched. And I remember Chris and I just put a moratorium on talking to each other about like, oh God, what's going to happen? We just said, well, we're a month away. There's nothing we could do except finish. And so now's the time to stop those discussions. You know, like we'll wait a month and find out. So I don't know. I think that's just important to share that like we never felt like it was made, and even after it started doing well on launch, we felt an incredible amount of pressure to make sure it didn't like turn sour or we didn't ruin it and stuff like that. So
yeah, would you recommend other developers do the same thing? Kind of be conscientious of letting their concerns, their totally valid and understandable fears and concerns, sneak into their studio discourse, like maybe putting a moratorium on that kind of talk in the last stretch? Or do you think that was something that was just very unique to the way you guys work together?
I don't know if that could be policy. I think it was just something that Tyler and I decided between ourselves because, we try to be as candid as possible with each other. And so it just hit a point where it's like, look, we're both working as hard as we possibly can. And the outcome is already kind of determined. Like, given that we have 60 days or 30 days or whatever, and we're going to work every single one of those days, the result is just waiting in the future for us. So there's no point in stressing about it. But I don't know if you're...
In parlance of the game, when the heroes get afflicted, sometimes we call it bark stress. They'll just say something and it causes stress. It doesn't do anything else except for stress out the rest of the party. They'll just say, I don't know if we're up to this, or whatever. And it's very similar. I mean, I think at some point you say, well, meaningful concerns, I think, are always important to bring up. Like, have we done too much on this thing? Do we need to scale it back? Are we missing communication to the player of this area? But at some point, just being I'm stressed doesn't help anyone and just infects the rest of the team. So I think there's times you go out and you have a beer and or a Coke or a milkshake or whatever, and you be honest with each other. You say I'm fucking terrified or I'm worried about this. But in terms of the actual development, I think it's really important to try to keep things actionable. This is easier said than done, but I'm just saying it
sounds amazing. Like listening to you, I'm like, yeah. I'd be on that guy's team.
Yeah.
But then
I'm very experienced, very professional.
Yeah, we have in our Slack chat now. We've got so we have a little emoticon for the stress halo. So now we're it's not totally enacted yet, but people are free to put the stress halo next to their name on any given day where they're feeling stressed out, and then we just know that there might be other factors at play here besides just
I notice it's been next to your name.
But
I hope neither of you put it on today for this interview.
No.
You're both doing very, very well.
Wait,
that's the thing. We hired a designer recently, and he was coming. As we both had from a larger studio, and he had a job offer to go and work at a bigger studio in Vancouver or come work for us. And I said, do what you're gonna do. Here's the salary, whatever we can offer you. And I said, I'll tell you this. As an independent developer, you feel the seasons of development much more acutely than you do when you're sort of buffered from it at a bigger studio. So when you are under pressure and there's a lot to do, it really hits hard. But the elation and the sense of accomplishment and the pride you take in the task, the ownership you feel, is similarly far beyond anything that I think you can get as a smaller piece of a bigger machine. So yeah, you're exposed to more risk, you're exposed to more emotional wear down. You're definitely it's hard to read some of the comments sometimes, those hit really hard deep inside you. But then you see posts and tweets and things that are affirming and encouraging, and it takes you to a much better place much more quickly than if you're sort of, like I said, part of a bigger machine. So he ended up joining us. And he's like, oh, I'm having a beer. We shipped the DLC. He was texting me, and I'm like, how does it feel? And he's like, it's amazing. It's kind of, you get the good with the bad, I suppose.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think, in the rest of the industry, I think the rise of indie, right, the ascent of indie developers and indie studios in the last couple of years has really done a lot to humanize the work of game development to people, just because by nature, so often, like by necessity, you have to be the people who are representing your game. You have to be out here with us talking about it on streams. You have to be out there in the forums, and that opens you up to a lot of discourse. But that also, like, that reminds people that there are human beings who make these, and that they have good days and bad days, and sometimes they're stressed out too.
I always try to get across to people too that, like, it's not that, some of the more critical acidic posts or whatever, it's not that we're not aware, but we have a list of things that we're working through, and it's like, it might be the most important thing in the world to someone, and it's really upset them, and that's fine. I validate that upsettedness. It's just not something we can act on right now, not because we don't care, not because we're not aware, not because we're not competent enough to see the problem, but we're dealing with X, Y, and Z first. And I think that if we can get one message out about game development and game developers, it's that a lot of times there are other factors and situations that you're in that aren't immediately obvious to the consumer, and so they're like, why does X not balance with Y? Like, well, there's a shit ton of reasons, and I have to feed my baby, or look at the economy this week, or whatever more pressing tasks there are. And so hopefully humanizing game developers is one thing, but getting people to understand that there's a process, there's production dependencies. So why animation, art needs to happen before animation can happen, that kind of thing. Educating people on sort of some of the high level workflow that goes into making a game, and why some things can't just be fixed like that, I think is really important, especially as like the sense of entitlement and polish rises.
Yeah,
and the trade-offs. I mean, I think everyone who's a developer understands that the problem is never, shit, we're out of ideas of cool stuff to put in the game. The problem is always, there's 100 cool things to put in the game, we have time to put 3 more. So what's the most important, or what's key? And so I think that's hard to describe to people a lot. That might just be from outside development is that it's a constant prioritization and compromise. Or something that I've run into this the most, I guess, in my job as a designer is many people come up with great ideas. The great ideas do not necessarily come from the designers. Certainly not only, but a really tough thing about design is that if a great idea is going to cause problems to 3 other things, if it's great by itself, but it causes problems to 3 other systems, you shouldn't put it in. And so a lot of times, people just say, well, why don't you do this thing? Because this thing on its own would be awesome. And, it may have effects down the line that make it just not desirable or risky. That's the other thing. Our game is, it's weird how development is shifting more to like a live ops type thing where, you're not just done once you ship. And so sometimes, we get a little nervous about, well, here's something that probably would be cool, but what is the risk of, touching the main game and, maybe causing a problem on something that has been fine for 2 years? So you have to remain a little bit like, we have decided that we can't be afraid to touch and revise, but at the same time, we try to, on some of that stuff, measure twice and cut once.
Yeah, sure. There are a few questions in chat that I want to swing back and collect if we have time. Notably,
Cool.
Mataruski asks, Chris and Tyler, do you consider Darkest Dungeon as being a success? And if so, I'd like to know why that is. Personally and professionally.
Well, for me, this is only me. I wanted to earn what amounted to a decent salary for the time I spent working on the game, and I wanted to make a game that had I wanted to craft a game. I wanted the game to have my art. I wanted it to be like a thing I could be proud of and point to. And I'm proud of it. I am. I did a shit ton of drawing on this game, and among other things. And it looks like I wanted it to look, with the technical limitations that we had. And I think as a body of work, I'm very, very proud of it, and I'm able to pay for my house. my mortgage payments and my internet and things like that. And so I think a livable wage and a work that is respected by your peers and, you know, commented favorably on by the people in charge of giving numbers to games when they come out is a real gift. And so yeah, I think in those senses it's absolutely been a success. I don't think it's perfect by any stretch. I'm not saying it's the greatest game ever made. I'm not saying that it's a work of brilliance and if you don't like it you just don't understand it. It's flawed. It's just as flawed as the heroes in the game. Like the game is quirky, it's a little janky in places. It's the best we could do with what we had, and we left nothing on the table, and I'm always going to be proud of both Tyler and myself for doing that. We just threw everything we could at it and did our absolute best. And sometimes things happen, you can't control them. Sometimes you just don't have the resources to execute on a scope. Sometimes one great idea will break two good ideas, not making it worth it, like Tyler was saying. But as a product out there, yeah, it's a success for me personally, artistically, financially, creatively. It ticks all the boxes, and I go to bed very, very grateful for that. I think every artist wants an audience, and I'm very humbled by the fact that our game found one. I think it's very, very special, and I know a lot of people who work just as hard as us and didn't quite get to the same place. So there's a certain amount of timing and luck, but we worked like dogs.
Nice.
Yeah, yes. I mean, if this isn't a success, you know, it's like, oh God, I don't know how we could do it. You know, I mean,
we got to start making our WoW killer. That's going to be the
right.
That's it, yeah.
Oh,
And the Dota 2 killer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the we've been making games a long time, and it's, you know, no other game. I don't know. I think I have like, you know, between like video and board and card games, probably like 15 or 20 credits now, and none of them have been, you know, anywhere near as big as this game, both in terms of, I guess, you know, notoriety within the industry, the fan base, and then of course like commercial success. And so that's always been a goal. Like Chris and I have shared like major ambition, maybe like too much ambition at times, in terms of just all the things that creatives do, where you start equating your self-worth to, you know, how your latest thing has done. And you know, so, and this is all to say that like we've been in the industry a long time, and have poured our soul into different things. And you know, one of the things that led us to start a company was, you know, a lot of the reasons that other indies do it is that you're just tired of having to do stuff because someone else told you have to do it that way. And you want to do it your way, you know, and you want to live and die by your own decisions. And, you know, I think that, you know, I'm really grateful that this game has been received so well, because I think we chose a risky thing to do that maybe a lot of people would just say, you know, fuck this game. I mean, we get those reviews constantly. It's not a game for everybody. You know, like Chris said, it's not only flawed, but I think it's not made to appeal to everyone either. And so, but yeah, it's checked a big box. I mean, there's really no other way to say it, you know, like it's checked a huge box of like personally and professionally, and that's something super grateful for and think about a lot. And I'm just really glad that people enjoy it. And again, I think it comes down to assembling a really good team for doing it. You know, I think like even with Chris and I think, you know, as far as founding the company, we didn't found it because we were friends. We founded it because our skills were complementary, and I think that's lessons born out of experience as well.
We also tried to only work with people that. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, go.
Your mic cut out, so I thought you were done. But now I'm just.
No, it was kind of like, you know, no, I had trailed off, and the value of my words was diminishing by the word. So continue.
We deliberately tried not to work with people we hadn't worked with before. So Kier is a great programmer that had worked with Tyler, and we roped him in. Our animator Brooks was somebody that I had worked with before. Pierre is another fantastic programmer that both Tyler and I had worked with, you know, years and years earlier. And so we sort of like went back through and found these people. Dana, the designer that we were speaking about earlier, you know, I've been friends with him. We'd both worked together. So when he's talking about a great team, it was sort of like going through the people. We wanted to build like the heist squad You know, like the demolitions guy, the guy in the van.
Yeah, Ocean's 11. You wanted to get everyone
Ocean's
together
11.
for
It was
one
more
last
like
job.
Ocean's 5. It's like a prequel. Yeah, we've sort of adopted that model of like, okay, who do we know that's available that can support themselves because we can't pay them, willing to take a risk and good at their job. So it's a bit of a tall order, and the people who answered the call are a huge part of us getting across the finish line. There's no doubt.
Yeah, we talked to other friends and colleagues that whose skills were just top notch. That they're going, wait, you're good. You don't have funding. They have jobs at Microsoft or whatever, making good money and working on stuff that they know will go to stores and have a big splash. And it is a tall order. It's not for everyone. Just like the game's not for everyone. I think indie development and the risks and the constant pressure and stress are not for everyone. But we also got really fortunate with some contacts that we didn't have before, like Power Up Audio and Stuart Chatwood, who does the music, and then Wayne June with what was the what?
I don't know.
Reinforcements!
Oh,
Took too long. You gotta get out of here.
Brian really doesn't like Power Up Audio.
Yeah, I know. It's like we said Stuart Chatwood. He's like, what? Those guys, the audio team as a whole, the sound, music, and narration, this game would not be this game without them. And those are all people that we hadn't worked with before. And so I thank our lucky stars sometimes that those connections materialized and worked out. And because I feel as it's funny as someone who's working on the game but isn't like I guess I'm just impressed every time their work comes in, and sometimes you don't hear it till the game's finished or like this package is finished. Some of the sound effects or even some of the art, I didn't see till finally we're like packaging everything up and trying to deploy. It's like, whoa, look at that, or listen to that, and so that's pretty fun.
Yeah. Yeah, there was a question in chat we didn't get to about how you found Wayne June and what it was like to work together. I don't know, maybe we can speak to that really quickly, but we do have to kind of wrap up, unfortunately, in the next 10 minutes or so. And I got to ask Bryant, how you feeling? How your spirits?
Oh, nice. You're week 10.
Those are my
districts
spirits.
have popped. I've been watching. You are not failing, and that's still one of the hardest things we have in educating players. Mm-hmm. But most RPGs, you're expected to win the quest. And when you don't win the quest, you reload until you win the quest. I remember. You say, "Oh, I didn't bring enough potions. I didn't whatever." But
so, let's look at your roster, right? Okay, hang on. Before you commit that guy, sure. You got 5. You got to think like just a huge asshole. So you've got $5,000 in the bank. Okay. Yeah. Scroll down. Do you have any level zeros? Okay, your bottom 2. That Vestal, that Crusader, level 0, and they're afflicted. Not worth the money. Send them packing. Free up your roster. They're useless.
So wait, how do I said? Oh, so just like right click,
dismiss them.
Damn.
Heartless. I wouldn't do it. They've suffered for you already.
The little red button underneath his name.
Leave nobody behind.
Wow, no allegiance.
Away.
This guy is not going to be. No, yeah.
Yeah, he's useless. Same thing with the Vestal. You got another one who's level 2 and fully stressed. Spend the money on her. She's at least pulling her weight.
It depends on whether you believe in rehabilitation or
no. And then, so now who do you have in the stagecoach? Okay, so grab all these guys, definitely.
This is why I can't deal with this game. I'll get like a couple of runs in, and just everyone is breaking, and I don't have any money.
But it's like it's triage. So then your level 2 healer and your level 2 knight crusader, those guys you want to spend money on because they're high level and they're really stressed. So that's worth an investment. Then you take out your little noob guys that you just hired on a run and give them sort of bare bones provisions, try to cut a few corners, and you just see what shakes out in the end.
You don't give them the Glengarry leads, is what you're saying.
No Glengarry leads. Jack Lemon, nothing for you.
You gotta earn those good leads.
Yeah. Leads are for closers.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate this Alec Baldwin tutorial going on right now.
Yeah.
I'm gonna figure out if I actually want to cure Reynolds of that or send him drop his stress. Let's just go drop your stress, Reynolds. You need.
Yeah, but you don't have money to be liberal right now. Like you're a startup. You have no investment.
God. You can only pray. Right. That's why I'm like, why was this? Right. Yeah. Go pray to a higher power. Okay. So my question is, I'm pulling this from a Liz England, wonderful game designer who was sharing some revelations last night from her time at Fifth Cell, working on the system-driven or supposedly system-driven interactions behind Scribblenauts. And she had a conversation. What she explained was, like, Scribblenauts is not entirely system-driven. Like, it's not all inheritances. It's a lot of hand tweaking to make sure that, like, the right behaviors trigger at the right time. And she wasn't, like, trying to undermine how that game's, you know, magic and illusion that you could just drop a word in and it would show up and the behaviors would correlate properly. She was just trying to explain that, like, when you're building big system-driven games, so much handcrafting is involved. And I'm curious, like, can you sort of explain the balance between, like, because I was just playing last night and it occurred, like, as my characters were yelling at each other, driving up their stress, but my, you know, this guy right here, the guy who beats himself up, Flagellant, there we go. Like, I was admiring this, like, stressful system playing out, but I was also wondering, like, how much handcrafting did you have to go in and, like, tweak to make sure that the right things were happening at the right times? That's my final question.
Oh, I like that question. I think philosophically, we try to make it very systems driven, but I think there's nothing wrong with, and sometimes it's absolutely necessary to go in there and shape the experience. You know, I think we've seen in the industry as a whole, I think we've seen a huge swing to procedural development, and I feel like we're starting to see, and certainly, or I truly believe it's going to swing more, people are going to rediscover the joy of a handcrafted experience. And so in our case, I would say because of workload and because of our team size, you know, we did need to rely on systems. So we try to build, you know, these overlapping systems that kind of create these emergent moments as much as possible. But as a tuning mechanism, as well as just a design and sort of, you know, et cetera, there are times to go in there and shape what's happening. So, you know, I guess that's not a great answer, but if I had to throw percentages at it, I'd say, you know, 75% or 80% of Darkest Dungeon is purely procedural based on things happening. And, you know, maybe up to a quarter, maybe not even that much, is us going in there and, you know, grabbing the wheel and doing stuff. But we try very hard not to do that because as soon as you commit to that, then you need rules upon rules upon rules upon rules upon rules. You know, if you're like, well, in this situation, let's make sure this happens. Well, in this situation, let's make sure this happens. And I think it's difficult to do, but one of the joys of when these discrete systems start interacting really well is you do get these moments that you couldn't have planned for if you tried to make it all rules-based and tried to make it all handcrafted. So we definitely embrace the systems, but if there's a cause for it, we have no. I think there's absolutely nothing wrong with bounding something, you know. But in terms of them barking and all that, I mean, that's just the systems. You know, the areas I think that we shape. I'm just trying to give an example. We actually do sometimes shape down the enemy crits. Like if an enemy got a crit, we reduce the chance that the next hit will be a crit, and the next. So despite all the horrible flack we take for RNG, we actually do a few things to slant it in your favor, but
we get accused of actually sculpting the RNG in the monster's favor, and under the hood, it's actually all in favor of the player. But
but you know, those systems, you know, we are a starting point too. You put them all together, and like so, the affliction system in particular. I mean, we've said this before. It's kind of funny that when we launched it in early access, I thought the thing we're going to have to mess with the most are the affliction and the affliction system. Turns out that we touched it the least. It seemed to just work well enough, and people enjoyed it. And it, you know, with a few tuning exceptions, most of our time in early access was spent on, you know, combat fixes, new content, etc. And I guess that was something we did pretty well off the bat in terms of what we threw in. So, but yeah, it's a very systems-driven game because we were a team of like 1.5 designers and 2 programmers and 2 artists. So, you know,
cool.
We have time.
Alex, is there any last question from the chat we should make sure gets answered?
No, I think we're good. We're just about out of time. So sadly, I think that has to be your final answer. Thank you both so much for your time today.
Yeah. Awesome.
Brian,
I will commence the closing ceremonies. Thank you all so much for joining us for another wonderful Wednesday on the Gamasutra Twitch channel. My name is Brian Francis. I have been a contributing editor at Gamasutra, and I've been joined by Alex Boirot, Tyler Sigman, and Chris Bourassa. Sorry, Chris.
The boost.
And we would encourage you all to follow the Gamasutra Twitch channel because we have a lot of other great interviews coming up with other game developers if you want to learn about the art and business of making games. Well, we got a lot of that coming your way. So please, we'd appreciate that follow. And other than that, Chris and Tyler, if there's anywhere they should want to ask developer-related questions to you about your work, where should they go?
Probably Twitter is easy. I'm at Bourassa Art.
Yeah, and I'm at Tyler Sigman. And conveniently enough, if they're watching right now, we have an AMA on our games in an hour. So God knows what'll be asked there, and may we survive it.
Yeah, everyone should go check out the AMA. I think it's on the Darkest Dungeon subreddit.
The AMA will actually be on, I think, our games.
Our games,
so,
cool.
Yeah.
Well, be sure to check that out. Anyway, that's it for us. Everyone, have a nice day. Bye.
Thanks for having us.